Speak fluently. There once lived a young man named Thomas in a small town. Thomas loves languages, but he struggled to speak English fluently. He could read and write English well, but when it came to speaking, he would freeze. His words came out slowly, and sometimes he could not find the right words to say. This made Thomas feel sad and frustrated. He wanted to speak English fluently, but he did not know how to improve. One day, Thomas decided to visit his friend, Sarah. Sarah was known in the town for speaking English very well. She had traveled to many countries and practiced speaking with different people. Thomas admired her and hoped she could help him. When Thomas reached Sarah's house, she greeted him with a warm smile. "Thomas, it's good to see you." "How can I help you today?" Sarah asked. "I want to speak English fluently, like you, but I don't know where to start. Every time I try to speak, I get nervous, and my words get stuck," Thomas explained. Sarah listened carefully. She thought for a moment and then said, "Fluency doesn't come overnight, Thomas. But it's possible. You just need to practice the right way. Let me share with you some tips that helped me." Thomas felt hopeful. "Please tell me, Sarah," he said eagerly. Sarah began. "First, the most important thing is to practice speaking every day. You need to use English as much as you can. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes when they are learning, and that's okay. The more you practice, the more confident you will become." Thomas nodded. He knew that he didn't practice speaking enough. He often only read or wrote in English. Sarah continued. "Second, find someone to speak English with. It can be a friend, a family member, or even someone online. The more conversations you have, the more natural your English will sound. If you don't have anyone to talk to, try speaking to yourself. You can stand in front of a mirror and talk about your day, your plans, or anything that comes to mind. This helps build your confidence." Thomas liked the idea. He could start by talking to himself when he was alone, and later, he could find someone to practice with. Third, Sarah said, "Listen to a lot of English. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, or even sing along to English songs. When you hear English, you start to understand how native speakers talk. You can learn new words, phrases, and the right way to say things. And don't just listen. Repeat what you hear. This helps you get used to the sounds and rhythm of English." Thomas was starting to feel excited. He realized there were so many ways he could improve his speaking skills. "But Sarah," Thomas asked, "what if I feel nervous when I'm speaking with someone? What if I forget the words?" Sarah smiled. "It's normal to feel nervous, but don't let that stop you. The more you speak, the less nervous you'll feel. If you forget a word, try to explain it in another way. For example, if you can't remember the word umbrella, you can say the thing you use when it rains. The person you're speaking to will understand, and over time, you'll remember more words." Thomas was grateful for Sarah's advice. He thanked her and promised to start practicing every day. As Thomas walked home, he thought about everything Sarah had said. He realized that speaking fluently wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying, practicing, and being patient with himself. He knew it would take time, but he was ready to start his journey. That evening, Thomas stood in front of his mirror. He looked at his reflection and said, "Hello, my name is Thomas. I'm learning to speak English fluently." He smiled at himself and continued talking, just as Sarah had suggested. Little by little, Thomas began to feel more confident. He spoke slowly at first, but as days passed, he noticed that his words started to flow more easily. He would talk about his day, practice new words, and sometimes even make up little stories. The next day, he called his friend Mark, who was also learning English, and asked if they could practice speaking together. Mark agreed, and they started having short conversations in English every day. Thomas had been practicing for a few weeks now, and he was already noticing some changes. He was no longer afraid to speak English, and his words were coming out more smoothly. He and Mark continued to practice every day, and they would often laugh when one of them made a mistake. Instead of feeling embarrassed, they encouraged each other to keep going. One afternoon, Thomas decided to take his practice to the next level. He had heard that there was an English-speaking club in the nearby city. People from all around would come to this club to practice English together. Thomas was excited but also nervous. Speaking with strangers was a big step, and he wasn't sure if he was ready. Should I go? Thomas wondered. What if I can't understand what people are saying? What if they laugh at my mistakes? He thought back to Sarah's words, "Don't be afraid of making mistakes." The more you speak, the more confident you will become. Taking a deep breath, Thomas made the decision. He would go to the club. It was time to challenge himself. The following weekend, Thomas traveled to the city. As he walked into the small cafe where the English-speaking club was held, his heart raced. He saw a group of people sitting around a table, talking and laughing in English. Some were beginners like him, while others spoke more fluently. One of the organizers, a man named David, noticed Thomas standing near the door and waved him over. "Hi, I'm David. Are you here to join the club?" he asked with a friendly smile. "Yes," Thomas said, his voice a little shaky. "I'm Thomas, and I'm trying to speak English fluently." "Great, you're in the right place," David said. "We're all here to learn and help each other. Just relax and enjoy the conversation." Thomas felt a little more at ease. He sat down at the table, listening to the others talk. At first, he didn't say much. He was busy trying to understand the different accents and ways of speaking. But then, someone asked him a question. "So, Thomas, what do you like to do in your free time?" a woman named Emily asked. Thomas hesitated for a second, but then he remembered his practice in front of the mirror. "I like to read books and play football with my friends," he said. The words came out smoothly, and he smiled with relief. "That's great. What kind of books do you like?" Emily asked, encouraging him to continue the conversation. Thomas realized that the more he spoke, the easier it became. He started talking about his favorite books and even asked others about their hobbies. The nervousness he felt earlier began to fade away. For the first time, he felt like he was really speaking English, not just practicing it. As the afternoon went on, Thomas learned a lot from the conversations. He picked up new phrases and expressions, and he realized that everyone made mistakes, even the more advanced speakers. No one was perfect, and that was okay. By the time the meeting ended, Thomas felt proud of himself. He had spoken English with people he had never met before, and he didn't feel afraid. On the way home, he couldn't stop smiling. He knew he had taken a big step towards speaking fluently. The next week, Thomas returned to the club. This time, he felt even more confident. He joined in on the conversations without waiting for someone to ask him a question. He shared stories about his town, his friends, and even asked for advice on learning new words. Each time he spoke, his words flowed more easily, and he felt a little bit closer to his goal. Thomas's journey wasn't over, of course. There were still times when he struggled to find the right words, and sometimes he still felt nervous. But now he knew that speaking fluently wasn't about being perfect. It was about practicing, learning, and never giving up. One evening, as Thomas sat at his desk, he thought about how far he had come. He picked up his phone and called Sarah. "Hi, Sarah, it's Thomas. I just wanted to say thank you for your advice. I went to an English speaking club, and it was amazing. I'm getting better every day." Sarah was thrilled to hear this. "I knew you could do it, Thomas. You've taken all the right steps. Keep going, and one day, speaking English will feel as natural as speaking your own language." Thomas smiled. He knew that Sarah was right. He still had a lot to learn, but he had already come so far. With determination and practice, he was sure that one day he would speak English fluently, just as he had always dreamed. And from that moment on, Thomas continued his journey, knowing that fluency wasn't just a goal, it was a process. Every conversation, every mistake, and every new word was a step toward becoming the confident, fluent English speaker he always wanted to be.